Very good morning to all of you. Welcome to the Medical Legal Conclave of Akriti. Akriti is a group of 18 friends who wants to do something different, not only sitting in a kitty and eating and chatting. In that way, the Akriti has come in front of you with the breast saga 6 months back, and today here we are with the Medical Legal Conclave, which is today is the burning topic for all of us. We are wearing a sari which is not white. Why? Because the white color of a doctor is become red with the blood of red and become little bit dirty with the why? Who is at fault? Whether we or the society? I think somewhere us, because we don't go to the society and tell our part. Because of that, today's the Medical Legal Conclave is bridging the gap with the society, with the lawmaker, with the policy makers. And my request to each of you, very much in time, very crisp message to everyone. And the extra talking is a main culprit. What you talk unnecessary in front of the patient, what your staff talk, and this sometime take you to the court. So learn here first thing to give the crisp message, precise message, follow the protocols, follow the SOP, and document everything.
I'll try to make it very brief. How many of you watch Netflix by chance? How many Netflix watchers here? And how many of you know about this Our Father? How many of you saw this movie Our Father? You saw this movie? And how many of you saw Good News? Lots of you.
Everyone saw it.
Everyone. And how many of you saw these twin stars? Very few. So there's a girl who sued her father for being her father. You know this? Oh, this is the story you should see in Netflix. There's a gynecologist in Indana, and he was practicing IVF. And during his IVF practice, he thought how to why and bother collecting sperms. So all the IVF babies born there, Dr. Donald, were fathered by him. And his daughter discovered it many years later. This movie is a wonderful movie. So this just doesn't happen in US. It happens in India also. So I bring to you a case from our lab 4 years back from city we can name, Dr. Gaurav? City we can name. Huh? So there was a patient in, okay, so there were two boys around 12 years old, and one of them used to abuse their father every day. And he would talk shit to his dad. And the dad said, he doesn't seem to be fathered by me. But they were both twins, born at the same hospital in the same place. And the mother got suspicious somehow. And the mother talked to somebody, and he talked to somebody, and they talked to our channel partner, and we got their samples. And to our utter dismay, we discovered that they were fathered by different people. But they were twins. They were born in the same hospital. So we sent our samples to a US lab and a UK lab, and they had the same results. And we shared these results with them. And the mother knew. She had a boss who was a very handsome guy, but very nasty. And when she had sex with the boss, she discovered that she should quickly have sex with her husband also. And then these two boys were born. And these things happen in our country also, and happen very often. And Dr. Meenakshi is privy to lots of those stories. Now these two cells.
This was? Which city was this?
This was in Pune. Now these two cells play havoc in our lives. I'm a pathologist by profession, but I do odd things. And I set up this lab. I was the head for Medanta for lab services. But I left that because it was no longer interesting. So I was interested in these cells, and we set up a lab, and we do our living out of these cells only. So this is my team, and we are in constant search for truth. And a lot of you are faced with a lot of things. where lots of times you can't go to the government, you can't go to the police. They're your patients, as Meenakshi rightly said. You know, you have a family and they want to buy prescriptions for their daughters. So what do? Now, I run an accredited lab in Delhi. We do mostly transplant assistance. We do bone marrow transplant assistances, and we do assistances for renal transplants. And most of these hospitals, the big ones, the Medantas and the Maxes and All India Institutes, some of them are sort of customers. I also run a bone marrow registry by chance. These are the tests we normally use for medical ethical work, standard medical ethical work. These are used for bone marrow transplants, but once a while they are also used for other indications, and we have to play between the lines. Now, these are the tests which you generally do for understanding patent issues, and lot of us who are in now practice have not studied biology in depth, and when I had my forensic exam, I went for a holiday, so I actually didn't read forensic much. So is true of most of the gynae obs people. So these are some of the tests which we use very often to understand paternity. Just to begin with, I'll take Dr. Vikas's help to take you across next 2 minutes. I'll finish in time. How the cells behave. You can talk to them.
So in next couple of slides, I will talk about some basics of the STR, which would help us to sort out the cases of paternity disputes. So like cell, which is the basic structure or basic unit of life, is like a universe, and it has several components, and the major among those are like cell membrane, cytoplasm and nucleus. And in the nucleus of each cell, DNA is packaged into a thread-like structure, which we called as chromosomes. So as an individual, we have 46 chromosomes. Out of those, 44 are autosomes and 2 are sex chromosomes. So out of those 44 chromosomes, half of them we inherit from our father and half of them from mother. And this is the basic about any genetic tests. So STR, that is the short tandem repeats, which we generally use for paternity disputes cases, is located on a particular chromosome, and these are short repeated sequence of DNA, which is 2 to 6 base pair long, and that accounts for approximately 30% of the human genome. So most of the STRs are found in the non-coding regions, while only about 8% locate in the coding regions. So this is the science behind the STRs. So first is the STR nomenclature. For example, this is a marker of STR, D3S1358. So D stands for DNA, 3 is the chromosome number on which this particular STR is located, S is for STR, that is short tandem repeats, and 358 is the unique identifier for that particular STRs. Similarly, we use 21 STR markers to establish the relationships, either whether it is paternity, maternity, or anything. So this PI and CPI is the basic tool nowadays we use for the paternity disputes cases. PI is the paternity index, which is actually a likelihood ratio, and it's a value generated for a single genetic marker or locus, and is associated with the statistical strength or weightage of that particular locus in favor or against of the parentage given. And CPI is the total cumulative index, and it indicates how many times more likely that it is that the tested male is the biological father than a randomly selected unrelated man with the similar ethnic background. So most of you have seen in the paternity reports that paternity is given in the form of like 99.999%. So this means that for an alleged father who is not excluded, that who is not the mismatched, the paternity report is 99.999% confident that he is the biological father of that child. So these are some guidelines, American guidelines, that in likelihood ratio, in the case of if likelihood ratio is greater than 10, shall be considered that the two tested individuals are related with each other. And if the likelihood ratio is in between 0.1 to 10, then that result is inconclusive to support the relationship. That means you need some additional tests or additional sample to establish in that case. And if value is below 0.1, then that means that both the tested person are not genetically related to each other.
So this is a very interesting thing. It's from Max Hospital. Draw your attention. Now there was a lady whose son is around 26-year-old, and the father was unwell. He had renal failure. Dr. Kuller wanted to, do the transplant. And as per the Human Transplant Act, you will have to have proof, medical proof of the son being the father. And everything was fixed till we told them that this is not the son. And unfortunately for Dr. Vikas, it was a Haryanvi family. And they asked who said this, and they came to beat him up. And the woman said, this is my son, he was born to me. How dare you say you have a cumulative maternity index of 0? Only when we pacified that lady, we discovered that it was somebody who had done an IVF around 30 years back. So, and these IVF embryo mixes and exchanges, we see every month at least one. So, please, when you collect these embryos and put them in the fridge like this bread and shove them in and then take them out. So, another incident happened from a city near us. It's not from Delhi, somewhere near Panipat. There's a very famous IVF center, and they used to do a lot of surrogacies. And there was one person who had spent billions of dollars to do a surrogacy here. He wanted to take his daughter to Australia. And that gentleman, that IVF center specialist, literally begged me to fudge the reports. So I just wanted to bring your attention, while we enjoy science, I was so happy that you have a forum where you want to follow systems. So if you do IVF, please be aware that if you do not segment, if you don't basket, if you don't do your eggs and sperms in the right place, this is another case I bring you 2 days back. Now this is another thing which you see in your OPDs every day. These families trust you a lot. And there was a sheepish guy walking into our lab 3-4 days back. And I stopped him. I said, you have a problem with your children or your wife? And he said, are you a Jyotishi? I said, no. I can look at you and I can understand what you're going through. He said, देखो मेरी वाइफ ना बड़ी डेंजरस है. मैं SBI में बॉम्बे में काम करता हूँ, पीछे से कुछ चक्कर लगाती. और बड़ी मुश्किल से उसने वाइफ को से छुपा के अपनी डॉटर का टूथब्रश साथ लाया. Now it's an emotional dilemma for us. Either you tell him go to the police, or you tell him go and break your wife's head, or counsel him for an hour. That I did, only to see that 2 days later he came again through some XYZ reference, and he moved into a hospital and he got they call it peace of mind. Only to discover that is his daughter. Now if he goes to court, if he goes to war, if he goes to lots of police, maybe he is legally right. But by the time he was very regretful. When he came to see this, he was very regretful, he was very remorseful. So a lot of times the doctors, while we say we should follow systems, we should follow rules, we should be decorum, but we are human beings at the end of the day. And human beings will behave humanly. And times we move and we do write prescriptions for USA. I have had tons of cartons of medicine sent to US because they are cheap. This is true. The only thing is we should do it smartly. Now when you have a biological sample, please understand, if you are in gynae practice, if you are in medical practice, sometimes you can be in soup. So make sure that are you handling a forensic issue. So please do not mess around with loose evidence. These are the things which are in evidence. Sometimes a biopsy, a nail, a hair, a toothbrush, we can do anything everywhere. A small blood spot. But make sure that when we talk about patented disputes and when you talk of rape, they are two different issues. A lot of times they are family wars fought on children. And family wars fought on children, at the end of 30 years, the justice also says, how about doing a compromise after 30 years? So these are the kind of specimens you will be collecting. We have to ensure that there is a difference between a sample and a specimen. A specimen is a representation of the whole. A sample may or may not be a representation of the whole. One of the things most important is to maintain the chain of custody. So there are chain of custody boxes, containers. This is our container. We get samples from all across India. So we generally also do a lot of genealogy work and we do a lot of publications out of the data, and we have a sort of an ethics committee through which we will go before we do the publications. Having said that, if you have a suspect sample, please do not tamper with it. Please do not use your own gloves. There was one doctor, I think, you called me? Somebody called, you called me? She had a patient. Now there's a lot of these boyfriend-girlfriend issues. and they have these products of conception, and they say, I was not that boyfriend, it was the other boyfriend. And then you quickly do one thing, you don't know whether to report the police or to counsel them, and they spend a lot of time in your clinics. And preferably make sure that these specimens are well preserved. Talk to a lab. There are samples which go bad in formalin, then you cannot extract DNA. There are samples which go bad in something else. So then there are samples, when you put saline in them, they will just putrefy. So after 2 months, if you try to do something, you can't do nothing about it. So if you want to do a DNA work or an RNA work, make sure that your sample's integrity is maintained. So you will have these issues day in and day out in your practice. Please understand that if you have a sample, talk to a lab which you trust, preserve it well, and then maybe after 2 years, you would need it. So just 2 points to be kept in mind is that we need to label them well, we have to inform the legal authorities, we have to have the consents in place. We shouldn't draw samples from babies without the mother's consent, and we should also try to check with our peers, with our colleagues. We have a huge fraternity here, and most of the times, but if there's some dangerous thing like an act or a legal offense, please do not meddle. So ensure that we are responsible for chain of custody, and handling precious samples is quite important, and sometimes we miss it in practice, that we say chalo chalta hai yaar, koi baat nahi, isko ya aise drawer mein rakh do tab tak, isko fridge mein rakh do tab tak. So these are some biological samples which are important. They have to be given due respect, and sorry, I'm done.